Welcome back, everybody, to Cool's Interviews. It's been a while since we delved into the world of Billy the Kid, at least on Cool's Interviews. I know we do a video almost once a week now, but recently a new book came out in 2022, Billy the Kid, El Bandito Simpatico. And I was late to the game getting to this one, I will admit. It came out in 2022, like I said, but I got to it about a month ago. I ordered it thanks to my mom, who sent me a link showing that there was a new Billy the Kid book, and I picked it up, was reading it, and posted in one of our Billy the Kid groups, and that's how we met author James B. Mills. And I will turn it over to him real quick. How's it going, James?
I'm a little weary, man, but I'm doing all right. I'm doing okay. It's nice and cold here in Australia.
Yeah, what's
So
the temp like right now?
we do the different temperature, man, degrees Fahrenheit, all that. So I just say it's cold.
It's
It's
cold.
chilly.
Yeah, we've been on the heat wave ourselves in Colorado. We'll see if
Yeah, I've
it
heard.
changes though, because we have that hurricane coming on the west coast, so we might see some weird weather here.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, James. Like, how did you become an author in the first point? Like, before even Billy the Kid, like, how did you go down this path, becoming an author and historian?
I was into westerns when I was a kid, and was just instinctively drawn to it, and it just never left me. It just kept going right through my teen years into my 20s, and I always enjoyed writing. You know, I asked for a electric typewriter for like my ninth birthday, and anyway, I just started to progress further into it and just went from there. I remember I was mentored a little bit in my early 20s by a late El Paso historian named Leon Metz. And I started writing a little bit of stuff here and there. I wasn't published back then. And then kind of life happened in between, and I kind of went out of it. And then I eventually saw that he had Alzheimer's. I thought, he put that was a damn shame. It kind of inspired me to get back into it. And it's just relentless dedication, I guess, is what led me to it. So,
Hey, with perseverance, you can do anything, right? So,
uh, almost.
almost anything. So because Billy the Kid obviously is from New Mexico, mainly is how a lot of people think of him.
Yeah.
You're from Australia. What drew
Mhm.
you into the Billy the Kid world rather than like the Ned Kelly world, let's say?
Young Guns,
Young Guns? Okay.
Young Guns movies when I was a kid, when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. Yeah, that drew me in. And of course, I mean, the movies now I realize are full of a lot of bullshit, but I mean, as all Western movies are, but that was what really sparked it. And just never left. And as we say, man, once you're bitten by the billy bug, it's a lifelong condition. It ain't going anywhere.
Right.
It'll like sometimes my focus will go elsewhere for a while. I've researched a lot of other different aspects of history, from the Punic Wars, Alexander the Great, the Scottish Wars of Independence. I mean, history of the Cuban Revolution, a lot of different history. But I always come back to Bonnie. He's always there. So I thought, if I wrote that book, I might finally get him to stop dancing in my head after all these years, but hasn't quite happened yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely understand that. Once you delve into that world, it's hard to get back out. You know,
Right.
we go to New Mexico yearly at this point, usually for other things, but we always stop in Fort Sumner. We always go through Lincoln, and yeah, it's hard. And and he has a huge like grasp over anywhere in New Mexico you really go to. There's something Billy the Kid,
He's the
whether
biggest box office attraction in the history of New Mexico. And it's
oh
kind of
yeah.
funny because there's some academic snobs in Santa Fe who will tell you that Billy the Kid is not historically worth, which is hilarious considering he's carried the lion's share of their tourism business on his little shoulders for almost 100 years. So he's the biggest box office attraction for a lot of people. I think around the world, he's maybe outside of the Roswell
Mhm.
deal, he's probably the only reason they even know New Mexico's on the map for some people across the globe.
Yeah, and no, I was gonna say that too, because having gone to New Mexico a lot, the only thing for us that I think I've seen people get drawn to as not as much but close to Billy is Roswell. And even in Roswell, there's a bunch of stuff linking to Billy the Kid. There's statues
Oh
of
yeah,
Pat Garrett. There's, Ash Upson's from there.
yeah.
And
Well, he
so,
spent time. He
yeah.
spent time. I was referring more to the flying saucer men
Hmm.
shit when
Yeah.
when it comes to Roswell. But yeah, no, Billy spent time there, of course.
Yeah. No, isn't
And
it
back
funny with Pat Garrett how he's stuck between like these two biggest legends in New Mexico where he kills Billy the Kid and then he's killed by Brazel, whose nephew is the one that supposedly finds the UFO crash.
it's all linked, man. It's crazy sometimes, but I mean, the research I'm doing now is for a book I'm writing now. That you may have heard of. You heard of Vicente Silva?
Hmm.
Yeah, the bad hombre, San Miguel County. I found a connection between his family and the James family, Jesse and Frank James's family, as it'll be featured in the book. I just couldn't believe it, man. Like, you got to be kidding me. This Vicente Silva's family's connected to Frank and Jesse James's family. That's crazy.
I'll definitely pick up that book. I've been reading your book. I'm about 60% through. It's hard with everything else we do, but I've made sure to at least take an hour a day and just sit there and read. And I gotta say, your book, there's not many Billy the Kid books where I can feel lost in it. And your book's been one of those books where I sit there and I read and I can imagine having been to Lincoln and stuff and just like having like a movie play in my head. So I think you did a really good job there.
You're gonna make me blush. Oh man.
Yeah, no, it's good. And
Thanks. I appreciate it, man. I do appreciate you saying that. But I just write. That's what I do. So,
yeah,
but I'm glad you're enjoying the read. Just don't drop the fucking thing on your foot, man.
yeah,
I ain't paying for a surgery.
yeah. No, I know I made that joke on Facebook. Um,
Yeah.
it's hard to add a lot to Billy the Kid, but I feel like your book has added more to the story. Do you want to tell our viewers that maybe haven't delved into the book what your book brings that's new? Because I know reading it, there's a lot that I've picked up on that I was like, either I forgot that completely or it's brand new. So,
Well, okay. One detail. I think everyone knows. Billy got captured by Pat Garrett. He was being held in the Lincoln jail and famously escaped. Everyone knows the story of that. What they don't know is that while he was being held in jail, the Hispanos in San Patricio and Picasso, they were actually planning to bust him out. They were raising up a posse of hombres. They were going to ride into Lincoln and bust Bonnie out. They weren't going to sit back and hang. And so, I mean, that's one little thing. Bunch of other. I mean, there's a lot of little historical details. I found out the name of the first guy he shot, Frank Cahill. I found out the names of his parents, which is just a nice little detail. Lawrence G. Murphy's correct birthday and his parentage is in the book. Every historian previously had his birth year wrong. He was younger than we thought. And there's a lot of little things in there pertaining primarily to his relationship with the Hispanos of Nuevo Mexico, the little interactions with them. Jesus Silva, who was one of his pallbearers in Fort Sumner, there's a new story came out that he told where Billy got his ass whooped by a guy named Hermosillo Garcia in Fort Sumner one night. They got into a fist fight and Billy got the piss beat out of him. But, they shook hands after that. And just a lot of little things like that. So try to, and there's other stuff in there too. I found used it as a source, a previously unknown letter that one of Bonnie's friends, Henry Hoyt, sent to Charlie Siringo. And I found used it has also used as a source a new little interview I found with Sally Chisholm. I found some new quotes from the Cowboys who rode with the kid in Lincoln County War. Interviews that they had done with newspapers that we weren't generally aware of. George Coe, for what it's worth, he said that the kid's father died when he was 4. Just little things like that, and just the broad perspective, I think, of who he really was as a person, as in the Billy that the people of his time knew, not necessarily the Billy that a lot of people nowadays think they know. So
yeah, the legend versus the reality, as they would
I got,
say.
I got no interest in the legend, man. That's I'll leave that to the movies and some other authors and stuff. Henry McCarty, alias William H. Bonney, he's the one I'm interested in. So, the real history.
Yeah, no, and I think kind of going back to the Hispanos thing, I think that's really important because not just with Billy the Kid, but as far as the Wild West, a lot of the Hispano traditions is what molded the American Wild West. As
Yep.
far as their gear and all that kind of stuff, how they wrangled horses. And so it does feel like a big missed opportunity that no one talks about it ever.
Well, what does Clint Eastwood wear in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? What does the man with no name wear?
Yeah.
What does he wear? You know, the little Hispano dress. He's wearing poncho. So I mean, it's they were. I think some Americans, some people generally forget that the whole Southwest that was part of Mexico for a long time before it became either states or territories of the United States. And I mean, throughout Billy's lifetime, the majority population in New Mexico, right up to the day he died and beyond, was primarily Hispano. There were far more Hispanos than there were gringos in New Mexico when the kid died. So that whole side of that history, it's starting to come forward a little, but you know, I'm trying my best to bring it further forward. How successful I am, keep going, and this next book I'm writing will bring it forth even more. So
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that. Like how long before do you think that goes public? Year, couple years, couple months?
it won't be a couple of years. I probably about, I had to guess, conservative guess, 3, 4, 5 months away from finishing it. The publication process will take about 10 months, 12. So there's a chance it'll be out by the end of 2024. If not, it'll definitely be out early 2025. So, but I'm aiming hopefully to get it out by the end of 2024.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely keep a lookout for it and read it, and then we should convene back after talk about that as well.
Anytime, man.
Yeah, no, and Sally Chisholm you brought up as well. We visited her grave recently when we went back to Roswell,
Oh, yeah,
but she
cool.
really kind of gets left behind. Most stories kind of just briefly mention her. It was really kind of nice reading your book to see her fleshed out more.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's blindingly obvious that Bonnie was warm for her form.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know the exact nature of their relationship. She clearly liked him personally. He was obviously after her. Then again, so are all the regulators, as far as George Coe remembered. So, and she was an attractive girl for her time and place. She looked, blonde haired, kind of cute. So, and yeah, she was a part of his life, especially throughout Lincoln County War. I mean, while they were in the big 5-day siege in Lincoln, he wrote Sally a letter. We don't have the letter, but we know he wrote her a letter. So that kind of tells you, well, if he's taking the time to do that while he's fighting for his life inside the McSween home, just before it's set on fire, that tells you that she was definitely meant something to him. So yeah, I thought it was important to flesh her out as much as anyone else.
Yeah, no, it's good because I think a lot of time the focus goes like on Paulita or Delavina and stuff like that, which is important. Obviously, they were very important in his life, but I think people forget about he had a life before then. And I guess maybe that's the fun of Billy is a lot of it is kind of up for debate, especially
So,
pre Wichita. I
oh,
think.
pre-Wichita, that's, geez, man. I mean, we barely know anything about his time in Indiana. I was talking to a journalist from Indiana. She's a real cool lady last night, and she was kind of wanting to pick my brain about him in Indiana. I'm like, look, we know he lived there because we can follow that through the pattern of Louis Mantram, but his stepfather, but we don't know much about his time there. Yet to find any school records or stuff like that. So we don't know exactly how long he was there, roughly 5, 6 years. But pre-Wichita, I mean, even Wichita, we don't know as much as we like, but pre-Wichita, you're following blind alleys all the time.
Right. Yeah, I swear, like every once in a while, I'll see someone like, we found the birth record of Billy the Kid, in New York, and you know,
Well, what
wishful
what we
thinking maybe, but perhaps one of them are
what,
true, right?
what we do have does point, in all probability, that he was born in New York. That's where he spent his earliest years. But and unless you find that link that can definitively tie a birth certificate to the Henry McCarty who was stood in the church in Santa Fe when his mother married William Antrim. It's just going to be speculation. The biggest thing we have is that his younger brother, Joseph Antrim, he listed his own birth record as being in New York. So that tells you there, if he was born there, as he stated, Bonnie would have been as well, probably. But I mean, that's the stuff you see online, people posting it. I mean, maybe I shouldn't comment on some of that shit.
Yeah,
It's some of it just really is eye rolling stuff, man. I mean, it's almost like any young man from Frontier Times that had a photograph taken of him that's got sticky out ears, slumped shoulders. That might be Billy. I'm surprised the guy received the time to shoot anyone, considering he spent all that time taking all those photographs.
right. Yeah, no, I've only well, first before getting to the photographs part because that's contentious. But going back to Josie, a lot of times I've seen it 50-50 where people say he's older than Billy and then the other ones say he's younger like you. Do you want to tell the viewers how you got to the conclusion of he's younger than Billy?
Well, Josie Antrim was born in 1863. Now, in order for Billy Bonney to have been younger than him, he would have had to have been 13, 12, 13, almost during the Lincoln County War. That's just ridiculous. This is not going to work. Josie was bigger, physically bigger than his older brother. That happens. I mean, I've got two nephews. One of them was always bigger than the other one, and he was the younger one. But and because of that, a couple of their classmates in school in Silver City, they mistakenly presumed that Josie was the oldest. And Josie, even apparently in the class, the smaller kids would have to sit at the front, the older kids would sit at the back. Well, Henry was small, so he used to have to sit at the front, and his younger brother, who was bigger than him, used to be at the back. So you can understand how they would have mistakenly thought. But for Bonnie to have been younger than Joseph, that would have meant he was about 14, 15 when he was killed. That's just not sound. It's not possible. Yeah, he wasn't that young when he was doing his thing.
Right, yeah. In that photograph, he may look young, but he doesn't look because photographs a couple years, so you have to be what, 12?
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
there's
yeah,
no way
yeah.
he's 12 in that
Pretty
picture.
much, yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, about 13, 14. No, no. He was about 20, 21 when he was killed. So, yeah, Josie was the younger of the two. It's if you look at it dispassionately, it all adds up. It points to where answering that question.
Yeah, and Josie's been one that we've been working on an episode for our channel on because he's perhaps more unknown than Billy as far as like what he's up to. I mean, we got census records, so it's a little bit easier to track him, I suppose. But I just want to know,
Well,
like, because he gets donated to the Colorado Medical School after he dies, because like no one claims him, and I'm just like, I wonder if they have anything left. I'm sure they've just dumped his body.
we think they might have a hand or something in a drawer like Jeffrey Dahmer's place, or
Yeah,
I don't
I've
know.
one of the
Uh,
colleges had Butch Cassidy, one of his
that's
not
true.
Butch Cassidy, one of the Wild Bunch's stuff. So
Because there's the legend of John Dillinger's dick. So
right.
yeah, I don't know, man. But I mean, Josie, we wouldn't even know who he was if he wasn't Billy's brother. So, but a friend of mine, young historian, he's like a year younger than me. Uh, James Townsend, he's done a lot of research into Josie. And he's found some nice stuff, and he has an article scheduled at some point in the foreseeable future for True West, which is called well, actually, I'm going to Townsend to watch this. I was the one who came up with this title. I'm just going to put that out there. He wrote the article. The title is called "Oh Billy's Brother, Where Art Thou?" And that'll be published by True West at some point in the next 12, 18 months. So, and that's going to bring some new stuff about Josie to light, little details about stuff he got up to, and fleshes him out a little bit. So I've read it. It's good stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye out for it. We've kind of traveled to some of the places in Denver and stuff where they're gone now, but at least the location where they used to be, we can be like, oh, this is where he was. And,
Yeah.
I know a lot of historians are like, man, that reporter's just terrible. Didn't even care that he was Billy the Kid's brother.
Well, there's a lot of people like me like piss out of it. So,
Yeah.
like what? What were you thinking?
right?
It's the way it is. Can't go back now.
Well, and does that speak more to how bad the reporter was, or Billy wasn't as big of a topic back then at that time?
At the time, Billy was a pretty big topic. I mean, Walter Noble Burns' book had been published. Uh, yeah, I'd say the reporter was just a dick. Um, well, I mean, that's my personal bias, obviously, because I mean, he could have got so much information out of Joseph. But yeah, he said, "Oh, Billy the Kid's brother. Who cares?" Yeah, thanks. But the reporter, I guess, just wasn't interested in Billy Bonnie. And not everyone is, of course. Some
Yeah.
people have that attitude. Oh, Billy the Kid. Who cares? That's the way it goes. And unfortunately, he was one of them.
Yeah, no,
Still like to smack him in
yeah, yeah, no. Every time I get to that point in a story where they talk about the reporter, I'm just like, come on, man! Like you were so close. Like even if you just ask what he had said to Pat Garrett when they met in the hotel, and then Pat Garrett didn't get shot, like what
the head.
happened there? Like what made it so they could leave cordial? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been a good one. It's kind of like when I found a few years back, I found this lost interview with Bonnie when he was in jail. You may not have got to it in the book yet, but it's in there in full. And these reporters went into his cell in Las Vegas. This was in the January 20, published in the January 20 Vegas Morning Gazette. And we got some quotes out of Billy, which was really cool, but Rudabar would not shut up. And like I'm reading this is like gold that I found. I'm like, Dave, shut the fuck up. We don't want to hear from you. Like, we want to hear from the other guy. You're not as famous. Yeah, you're a little famous, but like, that's just one of those things. And if Rudabar kept his mouth shut, we might have got even more out of Bonnie. But unfortunately, he wanted to share the spotlight. So he was known, Rudabar, I'll give you that. But yeah, his fame's he's remembered as like a guy that from
Got his
Young
head
Guns
cut
too.
off. Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, like you think about all these different like Western figures and how much we probably wouldn't have known about them had this Lincoln County War not happened. Now, I think if Billy's there or not, it's going to happen because that's just kind of the times, and Billy kind of just rumbles in on it.
Definitely. The Lincoln County War was going to happen whether Billy Bonnie showed up there or not. He wasn't the catalyst. He had nothing to do with the build up of that. That was definitely going to break loose.
Yeah.
Um, I suppose we could say thankfully he was there when it did, because I mean we wouldn't have that. Well, New Mexico's tourism business wouldn't be as good as it is if he had.
Going back to like Lincoln County, you look at how everything's happening where the different, starting with Brewer and then McNabb and stuff, when they get killed, it's almost happenstance that he also kind of gets put into the place of leader towards the end of the
Yeah,
regulators. And most people just right off the bat will think he was always the leader.
of course, because he's a superstar.
Yeah.
He was the leader. He became the leader right at the very end of it after the big siege, and for most of that time, he only had there wasn't that many regulators left, and he didn't get up to that much. They stole a few cattle from the Fritz Ranch, and they spent a lot of time in Tascosa over in Texas on the Panhandle. But it's kind of funny, like with Bill Morton and Frank Baker. Everyone always says Billy the Kid and the regulators killed Morton and Baker. Well, actually, it was Dick Brewer and the regulators that killed Morton and Baker because Dick Brewer was the leader, and
Right.
therefore he was actually more liable for their deaths than Bonnie was. Bonnie was just one of the crew. So, yeah, but nobody ever says, oh, Dick Brewer killed him. Why not? He was the leader. But, yeah, there's only, I think there's only room for one legend to come out of the Lincoln County War, and he just happened to be that one. But, I mean, he did earn it in the end with the whole, especially that jailbreak.
Yeah,
And
no, the
the live fast, die young whole deal. And that name, Billy the Kid, it's a perfect name for an
Oh, I know. Yeah, we're gonna end up going to Kansas here because there's a Billy the Kid of Kansas. I forget, it's William something. It was in one
There
of
was
the
one in Colorado too.
Yeah, I have an
There
old
was a
book.
stage roller.
Yeah, I have an old book called Sunset in the Rockies from like the 50s, and it shows his pictures and stuff. But it's funny how just the name and Billy the Kid, all these other out like actual kind of true outlaws took it, to use fear and stuff, even though Billy wasn't going around robbing people and holding up banks and stuff like that.
No, he wasn't a bank robber. That wasn't his deal.
Yeah,
But he preferred to just snatch some cattle from some rich gringos. A lot easier.
right. And back then, it was not to say it was right, but a lot of people were doing that. It wasn't just like it was the regulators; they just were stealing from the wrong people.
He was one of 1,000, Billy, in the Southwest at that time. He was one of thousands in that regard. As you said, doesn't make it right, but he wasn't anything special. The problem was who he was stealing from. If he had been stealing from the poor Hispanos, nobody would have given a shit. But he was stealing from the wealthy Anglos, the wealthy white guys. We can't have that back then. So, and I mean, John Chisholm was, he wasn't going to put up with that. The Santa Fe Ring wanted Bonnie gone. But I mean, the average Hispano, it's kind of that whole side of thing. The Anglo newspaper men were outraged by it and all that. Yeah, your average Hispano sheep herder and farmer. Does anyone really think they could have cared less if Billy stole some cows from some rich gringo that probably duped them out of their land? They didn't care. If anything, they were cheering Billy on, like, yeah, stick it to him. So that's part of what the book's kind of about. It brings the Hispano perspective forward into how they viewed him, whether how anyone today wants to, feel about how the Hispanos viewed him or not. None of my business. I couldn't care less. But that side of that history needed to be brought forward.
Well, yeah, especially because Billy felt so comfortable with the Hispanos. I mean, he spoke so much Spanish. A lot of time, people wouldn't know he might speak English if you just met him from time to time, especially down in Fort Sumner. He dressed in their ways. Yeah, no, I think it's wonderful to bring their story to light because a lot of them were friends with Billy and
Pretty much
felt,
all of them.
yeah,
Pretty much all. It's tough to find a negative Hispano account of Billy. I was actually went looking for one. Couldn't find one. Um, there's Celedon Trujillo, who was a resident of Fort Sumner. He said, he was a bad man to some of his own race, but he was always a friend of the Hispanic people.
yeah,
And they adored him. And the scenes that you see in the Young Guns, I'm not going to, I don't like to use movies as an example of any kind of history because I mean, movies are movies. But there's scenes where you see in the Young Guns films where the Hispanos are always excited to see Emilio Estevez, Billy El Chivato, and they're all excited. That's pretty much, that was their relationship. He was a hero to them. They adored him, and that's why they were going to bust him out of jail. He was
yeah.
their friend, and it's kind of, you get the dynamic. In history to me, it's all about perspective. I mean, you can look at that situation. You had a lot of Anglos. The newspapermen portrayed Billy as horrible. The Hispanos loved him. It's all throughout, a lot of history. I mean, William Wallace to the Scottish, he was a hero. To the English, he was an asshole in his time. And I mean, on one hand, you got Washington and Jefferson, American heroes, revolutionaries. Yeah. On the other hand, other perspective, they were also lifelong slave owners. So a black person out there might look at them a little differently and think, well, yeah, they did, the whole revolutionary deal, but they owned black people their entire lives. So history is all perspective where you're looking from in a lot of cases, and I think that you should try and view it from all perspectives, from all sides as much as you can, with the possible exception of the Nazis. Well, not with the possible, with the exception of the Nazis. You're not going to get any positives there. If someone out there views them positive, they need
Oh,
a
yeah.
lobotomy.
Yeah, no, that's a whole nother topic that is just
Yeah,
crazy.
I
But
just
yeah,
I just don't want to make it sound like there's positive and negatives to everything because there's not. I mean, anyone that sees a positive, to someone like Ted Bundy or the Manson family, get them some fucking help.
right. Yeah, no, no, a lot of times people say that, especially in America, we had the Civil War and stuff, and a lot of people will say that about the South, but talking about perspective, having known people that grew up more with the traditions of the South that moved up to Colorado, one of them told me Abraham Lincoln would be viewed as a terrorist.
In the South, yeah.
And I
I
was
mean, that
like, to us, like up here in Colorado, we're like, no, that's crazy. But I guess yeah, down there that would
It's all
make more.
perspective,
Yeah,
guys. That whole Civil War, you don't want to get me started on that.
yeah,
It baffles me that so many of you Yanks, you still like hold grudges over that. I'm like, it was 160 years ago.
right,
I mean, like, I mean, the South lost. Slavery was bad. It was a good thing that slavery ended. Move on. I mean,
right.
it's kind of. I mean, I'm not an American, so I mean, I'm not telling any American how to feel or react to any of it. It's just kind of crazy to me. Like, but then that goes on in Lincoln as well. I got a dear friend in Lincoln, Linda Sanchez, and she's told me that there's still grudges held like with the Lincoln County people, with
Hmm.
the descendants in Lincoln County. I'm like, it was 140 years ago. You're
Right.
talking about total strangers. I don't give a shit if it was your great grandfather. You never knew the guy. Motherfucker's been dead for 140 years. Let it go. I mean,
Yeah,
at some
there's
point, you've got to become a little indifferent to the fact that these were a long time ago, these people. Let it go.
yeah. No, I was watching. There's another YouTuber, but he was like, you can't feel super connected to these people so long ago because they would hate you. Like it was so long ago. They would see everything you're doing and you're totally disconnected from their lifestyle.
Exactly. And I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about total strangers. Even if it's your great great grandfather who got killed in here or there, you never met the guy. I mean, for all you know, he might have been a jerk. Maybe he deserved to get shot. I mean, maybe he didn't. But come on, I think holding grudges for things that happened over a century ago is a bit, in that perspective, is ridiculous, especially when it comes to the Civil War and stuff like that. At the Alamo, I mean, come on, like people still. I understand, you remember the history, sure, but like any Texan that's still holding a grudge, dude, let it go. I mean, it's how long ago was that?
A long time ago, 140
Yeah,
plus. Yeah. No, yeah. That the Alamo is another one where it's just like it's been spun too. The story is
yeah.
spun.
Oh,
Like
of
Texas,
course.
Texas lost terribly.
Yeah, they did.
And it's very
And
small. Like you go and visit it, you think it's going to be really cool and big. It's very tiny in a little plaza.
like, it was
But if
war, man.
yeah, if you want to
And
waste a good couple hours of your day, there's a movie Chupacabra versus the Alamo with the guy from Chips. What's his name? Uh,
I haven't seen it.
no, it's
The only
terrible.
Alamo movie I've seen was with Billy Bob Thornton
Uh,
playing Davy Crockett, and that bored the crap out of me. It was not a very good movie. I didn't think any. Had
yeah.
some good acting in it, but I just didn't think the movie was. Kind of like, but then I didn't really like Last of the Mohicans either. I think that's
Hmm.
overrated. So well, I love Wes Studi in that. He's great. Wes Studi, the actor, the native guy who plays Magua or whatever his name is. He's awesome. But yeah, drifting off.
We were on movies, and we had recently done a deep dive on Young Guns. So if someone were to watch that, like for me now, if looking back at it, I'm like, if someone were to watch that knew nothing about Billy the Kid, I don't think they feel very sympathetic towards Billy the Kid if they watch
Probably
that
not.
movie, because he's just
Probably
like
not.
loose cannon in that movie.
Yeah, he's live for the thrill of the kill.
Right.
Desperately wants to be famous. Billy did not care for his fame at all in reality, and it wasn't something that he went looking for. Um, yeah, pretty much. I think anyone who watch the films, they're very entertaining. There are aspects of Emilio's performance that ring true. The laugh, the sense of humor. Billy did see, laughed a lot, and even kind of crazy times. You saw the humor in things, grim humor, and that was cool. And he kind of looked like him. He was the right height, and I like the scene where he's dancing on. That's good. It's very Billy where he's dancing with the senoritas in Lincoln for New Year's Eve or whatever. And there's aspects of it too. But yet, for all that's wrong with the movie, if I was going to recommend any film, it probably would be the first Young Guns movie, just because for starters, you get the regulators with that, which you don't get with any other kid film. The whole concept of the regulators. So, artistic impression of events. Very loosely. I know the guy who wrote it, actually, John Fusco. I know him. I've spoken with him.
Oh,
A
really?
friend. Yeah, I know the guy. He's a cool guy. He has a copy of my book. He asked my press sent him a copy and sent him two copies, one for him and one for him to send to Emilio. I don't know if Emilio ever read it or not. None of my business. I imagine he's probably busy doing his thing. But I'm just hoping they don't make a third one.
Guns 3, yeah.
Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. You've made two entertaining westerns. What are they going to call it? Old Guns? Are they going to go? I mean, come on.
Well,
Old Billy's going to throw his false teeth at somebody? Like, come on. Let let it lie.
well, yeah, and at that point, because they've killed off some of the people that actually live, and then it's gonna
Yeah.
have Billy obviously being Brushy Bill in that
Oh,
movie.
don't get me started. Don't
No, I
mention
know.
that name.
I
Look
know
at the
we've
earlobes. That's all you need to do. It's all you need to do is look at the earlobes.
right. Yeah, no, we there's a book that I read about Brushy Bill debunking him, and
Mm.
it's far too long. It's far too long. It's longer than your book.
That'd be Gal Cooper's.
Yeah, yeah, see, you know. And that was such a slog to read through. And I was just like, it's really good if you want to know why, but it could have been like 200 pages. Like,
Well, I
could
mean,
have.
I'm not going to be a hypocrite and suggest that she write shorter books because my book, as you know, is quite lengthy. But if you're going to write a book that length, you need to be able to write a little better than she can.
Yeah, well, like I
I don't
said,
know. I don't know Gail Cooper. I've never spoken to her. She's done some good research, especially on the Santa Fe Ring.
yeah,
As I credit her with that in the notes in my book. Her view of the Lincoln County War to me is incredibly fifth grade, where it's angels and devils, is ridiculous to me. I like the fact that she's debunked a lot of that claimant nonsense. These people that think that Billy somehow got away, have they ever really stopped to think about exactly what Pat Garrett was risking if he had done that?
right.
All it would have taken was for Bonnie to show up alive in New Mexico a year or two later. Pat Garrett would have been ruined. He would have had to give back the reward money. His reputation would have been shot. Nobody would have ever employed him as a lawman again. Nobody would have wanted to work with him because he was a liar. You think Teddy Roosevelt would have pad around with a Bruton charlatan? Pat Garrett would have been outcast. This was the most famous, forget Wyatt Earp. He didn't get his fame until many years later. Pat Garrett was the most famous lawman in America coming out of shooting Billy. If he'd been exposed as some kind of charlatan, and this was a man who didn't like to take risks, he was very pragmatic. He would have been outcast. He would have had to probably leave the country. And look, as far as Oliver P. Roberts goes, as I said before, look at the earlobes.
Hmm.
Oliver P. Roberts' earlobes are conjoined. Bonnie's weren't. Your earlobes don't change over time. We have that alone just proves it. And look, I understand there's still a lot of people out there who believe in all that. There's also people out there that will tell you the Earth is flat. There's people that will tell you the Holocaust never happened. There's a lot of people, millions of people, who think that our species began with two naked white people in a jungle in a magical garden with a talking snake. It's just, I just don't have time for any of the pseudo history nonsense, which is why I never mentioned any of the claimants or any of that stuff. I never mentioned either of them by name in my book because they've had enough attention already.
Yeah, no, I agree. We've done a little bit on them. Well, just the one. We haven't gone to Arizona or anything, but we've gone to Texas, and the people were really nice there, and it doesn't hurt
Well,
me
they
if they
are.
think that, but like you said, the evidence really points to it. And I think another thing is look at how Billy, who he was. It's not like he's just ever disappeared. He's had multiple chances to
Yeah.
disappear, and he's
And
probably sticking around for Paulita. And
I,
Paulita doesn't go disappear with no one.
again, though, I don't think people realize a couple of people have proven in history that it's possible to fake your own death. It's a hell of a lot near impossible to fake someone else's. Um, I know that kind of thing works in the movies, like it works in Young Guns 2. It works in Josie Wales. This is real life we're talking about. This is a Fort Sumner full of Billy's friends who were very, very pissed off with Pat Garrett. for shooting the kid. Um, it's just not. It's pseudo history stuff. It's the Holocaust denial to me. That's the same barrel that it's in.
Hmm.
And I mean, there's people that make documentaries, amateur documentaries and stuff, and things on YouTube where they'll try and tell you the Holocaust never happened. I'm like, dude, I don't have time for this shit. You know, I'm a historian. I deal with history, not idle speculation and nonsense. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, no, man, I'm glad. Like, I'm sure that some of the people in Texas were really cool, and you know, if other people want to do shows on it, stuff like that, it's fine. But really serious kid scholars just have to deal with so many fucking idiots constantly trying to tell you stuff that they think they know, and it's just in the end you just like can't handle it anymore.
Yeah, no, I get that because like I said, I'm related to Jesse James, right?
Yeah.
And we've done a little bit on Jesse. It's not as contentious with him, even though there's people that'll say he survived, and all I have to say is
Literally a photo of him in his coffin with a
right.
bullet hole in his head.
That's where I'm like, if people also are always like, well, if there's just a death picture of Billy, I'm like, look at Jesse James. People
There
still
is a
deny
death
that's
picture.
Jesse James.
Exactly. I mean,
Like, and
oh,
no, but it's yeah, the Billy the Kid world gets contentious. I know what you mean. Even if you're on the same side as people, it's like it's hard sometimes.
oh, it's very. I mean, it was bad enough as it was, and then with the advent of social media nowadays, um, people say things in comments online that they wouldn't have the guts to say in person, which everyone I guess does. But it's always been contentious. It seems to have gotten more so in recent years. I don't. I have this reputation for being quite blunt with people in comments, which I guess I am usually because I'm very busy. Just give it to you straight. Here it is. When I'm commenting, I actually don't comment that much. I'm pretty quiet on the groups, like the group where you contacted me through. Now and then, if I see something, I'll put a little comment. But for the most part, I'm doing my work. I haven't got time for idle chat in a lot of sense. If someone posts something really good, like hey, this is a great article or something, little new detail about something, I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But
Yeah.
I don't comment on much.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am. I'm just kind of looking, enjoying what it is, but don't get too involved. So, hey, I'm glad that we both commented on. Well, it was your post I commented on. I'm pretty sure.
The
With
mine,
it was either yours or somebody posting a picture of your book. I think it
yeah, I think
was.
that's what it was.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
think it
then
was
I
someone else.
yeah, and then I posted. Yeah, I'm reading it too right now. And then you commented. So you know, kind of going back to when Billy died, he's sticking around in New Mexico, which is absolutely stupid. But he's young and he's clearly in love. And when you're young and
And
in
he's got
love,
balls
yeah,
too much.
yeah, when you're in that kind of state, you don't make the best of decisions. And
I think I think all of us men can speak for that. We don't make the best decisions when our hearts are somewhere.
yeah, no, and so you know, it. A lot of people are just like, "There's no way he would stay there," but it's so human to think that Billy so badly wants a normal life, and he's head over heels for this Paulita, right? He keeps going back to Fort Sumner. He doesn't leave.
She was definitely the one.
Mhm.
Billy was known to have a lot of girlfriends here and there over the years. We don't actually know. We know very, very little about his romantic life. In terms of there's a lot of look, family folklore is not history. There's a lot of stories that have been told down things here and there that he may have been involved with this girl or that girl. And I mean, he wasn't. He was a ladies' man, but that doesn't mean he was the John Holmes of New Mexico either. He didn't bump hips with every senorita who he was friendly with. But poor Lita, it's pretty clear that she was the one. He told Martin Chavez, you know, before when he stopped in Picasso before he went back to Fort Sumner after making his escape that he says no, I'm not going anywhere without. What did he say? I'm going to go with my wife. They weren't married, but that was his idea. And he even, according to Martin Chavez, Billy said, if I die, I'm okay because I die for her. Well, that's exactly what happened.
Mhm.
So
Well,
little
and
Romeo and Juliet to it, kind of Not that I'm a romanticist, but a little bit of that to
Right. Yeah, and he gets set up by Paulita's brother, who's not very fond of this idea of them being romantically intertwined.
Well, that again, I mean, there's multiple stories of how Pat Garrett got tipped off that the kid was there. When you put all the evidence together, as I have, it's if you're capable of reading between the lines, which you have to do sometimes, it's pretty clear whose bedroom did he get shot in. Who was it who Pat Garrett went to see in Fort Sumner to ask where have you seen the kid? It's Pete Maxwell, and there were numerous people who said that it was Maxwell, and I think what sealed it for me with that was Vicente Otero, who was a resident of Fort Sumner. He was at Billy's funeral. One of Billy's pallbearers. He lived until 1958.
Yeah, saw
Very old.
live to see the
Yeah,
Elvis as you put in your book.
yeah. He said straight up. He said Pedro Maxwell didn't want Billy to marry his sister. That's why he told Pat Garrett that Billy was here. And he said that, and he was in Port Sumner at the time. He said that straight up, and that to me was enough to kind of really push it over the top. But it's pretty clear to me, at least, maybe not to some other people, but it's pretty clear to me what went on there. That it was Pedro Maxwell who played the role of Judas, so to speak.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, hey, it's not like I can understand it to a point. I mean, Billy was a wanted outlaw, the most wanted outlaw in the Southwest at that time. I mean, he didn't have much of a future, and they wanted to take his sister to Mexico. I can understand why he would think that maybe wasn't best for Paulita. I get it. Um, I don't think Billy's Hispano friends felt that way, but all perspective, I guess.
Right. And Pat spends the that day or that night, I should say, that morning held up because he's worried that he's gonna get killed now because of what he just did.
Oh yeah, him and John W. Poe and Kit McKinney, they had to retreat into the Maxwell home very quickly. There were a lot of amigos and Billy were very, very, very angry. None of them tried anything, but it was definitely this idea that Billy's dead, let's all celebrate. And no, it was the exact opposite. They were furious that their Bilito had been killed. That was their boy.
Yeah. Yeah, as Delavina put it, she was happy that she was able to see all the people that harmed her, Belito, put into the ground before she was.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. She definitely held a grudge,
Hmm.
but she was a surrogate mother, kind of really to Billy. So, and I mean, if you look through her history, she had to give a baby up when she was a slave, the Maxwell Navajo slave in the Maxwell family. She had to give the baby up, which I don't think would have been her choice. And so I think maybe in a way, kind of wonder, did Billy kind of become that little bit of a not a replacement, kind of fulfill that motherly instinct she wanted to impart. So
Yeah,
yeah,
kind of.
she certainly never got over it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing. It's just like you look back at the people of Fort Sumner and they just had such a love for Billy, you know,
Oh yeah,
and
not just
Pat.
in Fort Sumner. I mean, San Patricio,
Mhm.
Picasso, all along. Yeah, the Spano sheep herders, farmers, pretty much all throughout southeastern Nuevo Mexico. He was welcome pretty much anywhere among the Hispanos, just about. I'm sure there were a few that didn't like him, but they're pretty damn hard to find.
I would say probably if you were looking to people that didn't like him, it was probably in Lincoln, probably on the opposite side of, Tunstall and all them. Even though there were
I'd
some
say
on the opposite side that he was friendly with still.
to a point, yeah, to a degree. Gus Gilder, yeah. I mean, he knew him in Arizona before the Lincoln County War. The Jones boys, he supposedly, according to tradition in the Jones family, had a good relationship with them to some degree. He had a drink with Buck. I can't think of his name right now. With supposedly had a drink with one of the former Dolan guys up in Fort Sumner when he bumped into him at one point. So yeah, but that whole feud, that the bad blood there didn't wash away easily for the most
Right.
part. I think Billy he I think he would have happily put a bullet in Jimmy Dolan probably till the day he died if given. But I mean, he had a chance to do it, but he never did. So who knows?
Yeah, like he says, he doesn't want to keep fighting. He's kind of tired of it, and they make that truce that doesn't really last very long because
It lasted literally 5 or 6 hours
yeah,
because the Dolan guys murdered Houston Chapman in the middle of Lincoln, and
in cold blood too. Yeah,
Billy played no part in the murder, but he was there and witnessed it. And yeah, it's must have been the shortest truce in history. I mean, it ended that night pretty quick.
well, and like how it's written in your book, it seems like it was kind of a setup to kind of maybe force Billy into their ranks because they didn't let him leave. Like Dolan, no, you're gonna stay here when it
I
happens.
don't know about that. I don't know about that. I think it was Campbell just being who he was.
A
Um,
psychopath.
yeah, well, I don't. Yeah, I guess to a point. I mean, Bob Ollinger was definitely a psychopath, but I don't like to use psychological terms with historical figures. It's kind of I'm not a shrink,
Right.
but yeah, I think it was just it was one of those spur of the moment things. They ran into him, and ill feelings rose up. I don't know if it was intentional to kind of trap Bonnie with them or anything. You gotta be careful not to read too much into things.
Right. Yeah, don't get too fanciful with it. Uh Sometimes history is just history, right?
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar.
Right? The umbrella is just an umbrella. Yeah, no, the house is just a lot of times, like you said earlier, they get made out to be just demons, right?
The
Black and white.
nasties of New Mexico.
Yeah. Where in your book they were definitely doing bad, but everyone was doing a little bit bad. It wasn't totally black and white. Do you think McSween kind of orchestrated a lot of this though?
McSween was a swindler. He was a shyster. He really was. John Tunstall was just as greedy and just as power mad, hungry as the house were. They really were. I've discussed this with some other historians, and we've kind of looked at the situation and said, well, in a perfect world, all the guys, the regulators, and then the guys from Seven Rivers, they would have got together, handed their guns to Dolan, McSween, and those guys, and said, "You guys can go sort this out. We're going to have a beer." In a perfect world, that's what would have happened because Tunstall did not deserve to get brutally murdered the way he was. That was, it's no wonder Billy and then the regulators were pissed. But Tunstall was no saint, far from it. He was very, very, very much like Dolan in that sense. He did not Alexander McSween and John Tunstall, they did not want to take over, like as the lead enterprise in Lincoln County, to make things better for everyone else. They wanted to take over so they could reap the exact same benefits that the house had been. So it was either going to be, the lesser of two evils, so to speak, in one sense. McSween, look, man, if you look at that Fritz Insurance Fund's case, it's pretty clear what happened.
Embezzlement,
And
yeah.
that is what got Tunstall killed. There's still the big perception is that Tunstall was murdered because he opened a store. Well, if that's the case, why wasn't Tron murdered? Why wasn't Jose Montano murdered? There are a lot of stores in Lincoln. That might have been a part of it. I think the house resented that, this English guy had so much money that he inherited and could get from his family. But Tunstall was murdered because of the Fritz insurance funds, far more than because he was, wanted to be the lead merchant. So it was an insurance funds war more than a mercantile.
Yeah, and when you go to Lincoln, it's always interesting to just see how close everything is. Like it's not like they were on like far ends of the town. They were pretty close as far as the
Oh yeah,
house and the Tunstall store and where McSween home. Like Lincoln's not very big, and that's
one
again,
mile long.
yeah, yeah. Reading your book again, it's fascinating knowing the locations, having seen them in person, and then just thinking the history through it and kind of seeing history again. You talked about Mr. Ollinger,
Mm.
and he's the one character I think no matter what film is always portrayed the same. Like he's just not very nice. Like even if you look at One Eye Jacks, where it's just loosely, and I use that very, very loosely based on the Billy story, Slim
Great
Pickens
movie though.
character. Yeah, wonderful movie. We have to do a deep dive on that sometime. But yeah, he's always just portrayed the same. So it's got to be pretty well known to everyone that he wasn't the nicest person.
I love Leon Rippey's performance as him in Young Guns too. That loud mouth, that actor Leon Rippey, who's been in quite a few films I've seen. Good actor, kind of a character actor. But yeah, I loved his portrayal. That pretty much hit Bob Olinger on the head, I think, for me. He needed to grow a mustache for the role. I don't know why he didn't do that, but um, when a guy's own mother basically says that her son got what he deserved when he got shot, that pretty much tells you the kind of guy he was. Pat Garrett said openly that he was afraid to sleep around Bob Olinger because he was afraid that Olinger would shoot him in his sleep just to get the fame of being the guy who shot Pat Garrett. Hardly anybody, except for his love interest, Lily Klasner, she was probably the only one that mourned him, maybe a few of his friends, but I mean, the majority, look, you call it what it is. Billy did Lincoln County solid when he put Olinger in his grave. He really did. That was one less very malicious murderer in Lincoln County in that sense. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. I've never really thought about it. He pretty much is always portrayed the same in every film. There's never
There's
been any kind of differential with him, and that's who he was. He was nobody liked him hardly at all. Yeah.
yeah, it's always interesting. And you
But
know,
can I just add one thing?
yeah.
In the same films, James W. Bell is always portrayed as sympathetic. Like
Mhm.
the nice of the two. It's like good cop, bad cop. Well, James Townsend, that young historian I mentioned, he's one of the admins of that group. You remember? He put out an article recently that was in the Historical Kid Coalition Journal. And then I work as a columnist for the Tombstone Epitaph. And my editor heard about it and he was like, I think we should run it. And I said, yeah. And so we published it as well in the Tombstone Epitaph, which is a monthly newspaper we put out about Western history. And well, he puts out, I just contribute here and there. And it's an article about James W. Bell in which James Townsend has discovered that at the time that James W. Bell got shot and killed by Billy, he was actually a fugitive himself, James W. Bell. He had been released on bonds due to his involvement in the murder of a farmer in Texas just 2 years earlier. Now, James W. Bell has always been portrayed as an opposite co-op. He was a fugitive himself from the law when he was a deputy in Lincoln and was shot. So there you go. I mean, James W. Bell was no saint either. He clearly had a past, but almost everyone had a past in those days. Anyone who carried a gun had a past, just about.
Right. No, that just reminds me, going back to our Young Guns deep dive, where they I think it was Jarrell who played Billy the Kid in New Evidence, but he was saying you know, Charlie Sheen's Dick Brewer seems really reserved because Billy the Kid is killing everyone. So yeah, Bell's gonna seem pretty reserved when you have someone next to him like Ollinger.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, Dick Brewer. The I think the Charlie Sheen portrayal was pretty. Except Dick Brewer was a blonde. He had blonde hair. Same thing with the Earps. The Earps in every movie they're portrayed as dark haired. The Earps were blondes. They had blonde mustaches, blonde
Yeah.
hair. Um, Maybe one day they'll get that right. I always thought when he was younger that Jeff Daniels actually would have made a really good white Earp with the mustache. I always thought he would have been great in that. But the Charlie Sheen portrayal of Dick Brewer is pretty much on the spot. I think Brewer sometimes gets portrayed as a little bit too much of a saint. He was still a man of his times, and he was the leader of the regulators when they smoked Morton and Baker. Not that I hold it against him. Morton and Baker had done enough to have it coming. So that makes him liable. And I've always never really been convinced that Brewer didn't have any knowledge that the regulators were going to shoot Brady and Hunt. So
Yeah,
I always
it it's
Brewer said that he objected to that. He didn't consent to it, but then he had no problem reassuming leadership of the regulators just a couple of days after it happened.
it
So, and Brewer showed his temper at Blazers Mill. So he wasn't a saint. You know, everyone back then had a rough side of it.
yeah, it's kind of a parallel with Brady just happening not to go with the posse when Tunstall was killed.
I've long said anybody who honestly believes that William Brady had no part at all in John Tunstall's murder, I have a bridge in Camelot that I would like to sell.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Um, it's look, the people you will get some academics who usually have the personality of a dead house cat who will say, "Well, we don't have any hard evidence." I'm like, "Well, what are you expecting to find? A signed confession?" If you look at that case, the Tunstall murder case, it's pretty clear that Brady, at the very least, had knowledge of rough idea of what was going to happen, and that makes him liable. So, and he was an accessory after the fact, I think, as well. So,
yeah. No, it's not like he sent a bunch of, really upstanding citizens to go carry out this. They were rough cowboys and
well, I mean, it's all with that case. The reports we have, a lot of it's contradictory. It kind of gets amusing at times where it's pretty clear the members of that posse are trying to cover for each other and clear themselves and kind of shift the blame here and there. And you view it on the whole, you get a pretty solid idea of what went down.
right. Well, going back to the history of Billy Kid, there's a character that's brought up in your story who lives in Roswell, Ash Upson. He, even though Pat Garrett most notably is noted for this book, Ash Upson created a lot of this, including like the backstory pre Pat Garrett coming in was a lot of him,
Well,
right?
Ash Upson physically wrote the book. He actually wrote the book.
Yeah.
He was the ghostwriter. Uh, there's a point in that book where you can see the narrative kind of shifts a little, and it's right up in the run up to when Pat Garrett's going to pursue the kid, where you can tell that Garrett's version of events. Not that I think Pat Garrett was 100% honest about a lot of things either. I think he did he admitted some things where you can see where the course of that book kind of changes, where it kind of goes from Upson, but then it's impossible at times to separate where Upson ends and where Garrett begins. If Pat Garrett had actually sat down and written that book from start to finish himself, it would be very, very different. That Ash was he was a romanticist and he wanted to write a sensational book, and he did. Uh, there's some glimmers of accuracy in it, but for a lot of it's just bullshit.
It's like a
A lot of
dime
it.
novel.
Yeah, I don't know if I go that far. Well, actually, yeah, in some ways, yeah, it was. He wanted to, you know, make a legend, and he certainly helped do that.
Before we jump to the other one, Biggie or Tupac?
Pac,
Pac, okay. That's where
Pac.
I'm at too.
I, I like Biggie. I
Yeah,
like Biggie. I respect Biggie, but no, definitely Pac. But if I've got to choose between two, it's Pac for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, Pac.
right. Yeah, no, I agree there. Uh, Earlier you mentioned that live fast, die young kind of mentality, the James Dean mentality, has a lot of people attribute to him. James Dean was wanting to play Billy the Kid. He would have had he not died. He would have been a left-handed gun. Is that another big factor you think in Billy the Kid's legend living so long?
Partly, yeah. To some degree, that people. I mean, it's not just James Dean, man. Jim Morrison, Hendrix, Joplin, Cobain, Pop, Biggie. I'm not saying it's necessarily Sid Vicious. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing. That however you want to feel about it, but the whole live fast, die young. I think it definitely plays a part in that young rebel image that people seem to like.
Yeah. Well, and Billy just seems obviously he has his hot side, right, where he's able to do some of these killings. But at the same time, he seems very likable. He's just a kid that's caught up in a war. Just like if you look at any other war, it doesn't mean those kids fighting it are bad. They're just in that situation.
To a point, yeah, he was very, very well liked. So I mean, he was clearly likable. Even Pat Garrett said he was likable. Pat Garrett stuck up for him. So Billy, most of the people that knew him personally were very fond of him and spoke of him quite favourably. At the same time, he was no saint. I mean, he stole horses and cattle, and he shot his share of men on the southwestern frontier. Those are the times, I guess.
Right. And how many deaths do you attribute to Billy? Not 21, but how many?
Was definitely four
Yeah.
individually that he single-handedly was responsible for. Two in self-defense, two escaping prison, and he was involved in shootings that killed the enemy, the other guys during the Lincoln County War on a number of occasions. So four individually, all up, he was involved in shootings that killed probably around the number of about nine, I guess, all up, eight or nine. So,
Yeah, no, it's the Lincoln County War is just something that, it's a small little war. It's not like this big
oh yeah,
countrywide war, but in the same time, it does affect the country because, the president's getting letters and having to put his friends in New Mexico as far as like Lew Wallace.
yeah. Lew Wallace wasn't happy about that. Lew Wallace did not want that job, and hated New Mexico the entire time he was there, and could not wait to leave. But yeah, you're right. It wasn't a it wasn't a big you know big nationwide war. Of course, it was this little. Well, Lincoln County was the biggest county in America at the time, but so it certainly got enough attention for a little. So, but there were other wars as well. I mean, you had the I don't know if you could call the Earps with the Cowboys in Cochise County, call that a war, maybe a feud. I mean, there are a lot of others. The Johnson County War. There was one in New Mexico, the Colfax County War. Just, in fact, a friend of mine, historian friend of mine, Corey Recker, has written a book that I've read for peer review recently. It hasn't been published yet, and it'll be coming out by University of North Texas Press soon. It's about the Colfax County War, which was the other big county war in New Mexico in a few years before the Lincoln County War. And that book would be definitely worth a read.
Right. Well, and at the same time, it's not super big. It's not super well known to like a general public as like say a Tombstone. Even though Tombstone is very, very short, it's really just the OK Corral. It's not like it was this big battle like Lincoln County became.
Well, it depends on when you mean. Tombstone became the gunfight near the OK Corral, as I call it, which is, that's what it was. That became famous, more famous a lot of years later on. As far as I don't think the president was contacted regarding the whole Tombstone deal. So the president, President Hayes certainly was. He knew about what was going on in Little Lincoln County at the time. So I guess you could say at that time, 1870s, 1880s, the Lincoln County War was the more famous of the two.
But like modern day, would you say it's flipped? Like Tombstone's definitely more.
Billy the Kid's more famous than himself, is more famous than I feel to some. It's close, but he's more. The name is better, known, a little better known than maybe Wide Open, the whole Tombstone deal. But I think if you had to pick the terms gunfight at the OK Corral or Lincoln County War, I've got to give the nod to the gunfight at the OK Corral. Now, in now present time,
Yeah.
that'd be a little.
Yeah. So that's where it's kind of interesting. Like we see
So
so many.
movies played a big part.
What'd you say?
Movies have played a big part in that films.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah. No, it's hard. I mean, Val Kilmer is pretty iconic as Doc Holliday, and you know, there's a lot of times, like you said, with Billy the Kid, it doesn't really focus too much. Not a lot of them focus that much on the Lincoln County War.
no,
You get
so
like
it's
Young
mainly about Bill.
Guns. Yeah. Young
And
Guns.
Young Guns was the first to really do it, to really
Yeah.
give like the Lincoln County War its due, and that's why I do give the film credit. It was the first film to have the regulators, that word used, and so at least that did deal with that. Young Guns film. A lot of the early kid films. I mean, it was just all about Billy. He was the central to everything. When really in the Lincoln County War, he was one of dozens of guys. He was known, but no more than some other dudes.
Right. Well, and
Had a,
there's that John Wayne Chisholm film.
oh Christ!
Ob Obviously, John Wayne Chisholm is not a very accurate portrayal of
I'm not
who.
really a fan. I'm not a fan of John Wayne, to be honest. I know that's blasphemy. I don't believe in blasphemy, but it's considered blasphemy in parts of America. But I'm simply not a John Wayne fan. I saw Chisholm when I was younger, a lot of years back. I can't remember that much about it. Um,
Right.
yeah, what were you going to say about it, man? You probably know it better than I.
I know it's not a very accurate portrayal. I mean, obviously Chisholm's not running around just punching everyone here and there like John
But
Wayne
Chisholm was
does.
an old man in the Lincoln County War, and he never carried a gun. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
you
no,
know,
it didn't make it very far in our movies featuring Billy the Kid bracket.
John LeMay.
Yeah, we met him in Roswell and we've been had him on the
He's a
channel
friend
a
of
couple
mine.
times. Yeah, no,
He's
John's
a friend
great.
of mine. Yeah, he's a great guy. He's a good writer. Good historian. He's a handsome devil too.
Yeah,
Pisses
no.
me off. But no, I'm kidding around. No, I know John. Yeah, he's a good guy. I did this little interview thing with True West magazine, and I wrote something like a lot of the answers were tongue in cheek, meant to be fun. And one of the things was there was a couple of questions. One was, what has history taught you? And one of the things I had in was never trust the US government. And there was another question that's, what people don't know. And I put, I've never been a fan of John Wayne. When that little interview came out, nobody cared that I said I don't trust the US government. Nobody cared about that. People got pissed off because I said, all I said was, never been a fan of John Wayne. And people seriously got pissed about that. I found it quite amusing. Some of the comments, like people you would have thought I'd insulted their father or something. Whatever. To me, he was chicken hawk.
Yeah, he played the same character every time. Not a lot of diversity in his
Well,
range in his characters.
so does Clint Eastwood, but Clint Eastwood does it better.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, his performances are just so iconic.
Well, I mean, I don't like John Wayne personally, to be honest. I mean,
Mm,
I can watch a couple of his films if I'm bored, but yeah, it was what it was. He's not for everyone.
right? Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm looking at I own too many movies, probably an unhealthy amount of movies, and I
So,
don't. I think the only John Wayne movie I have is Chisholm.
but I will say, there's another. I'm curious. You did this dive in on the kid movies. How much time did you spend on Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, the Sam Peckinpah movie, with Chris Christopherson and James Coburn?
So, as far as when we did our top 10 Billy the Kids, which we got to update that because it's one of our first videos and it's not very good. Uh, Chris Christopherson does not rank very high.
Well, I can understand that because he was way too old.
Yeah, and
But
Bob Dylan would have been a better Billy the Kid.
Bob Dylan couldn't act his way out of a paper bag in that film. I love Bob Dylan. I'm a
No,
big
but
Bob Dylan
just as far
fan.
as like looks and age, and he
Oh
would
yeah,
have been much better.
yeah. Chris Christopherson was way too old, but then every actor who's ever played Billy was too old. Even Dehan was
Mhm.
too old. He looked the part and he did really well, but he was too old. Emilio looked young in Young Guns 1, but even he was a little too old. None of them were teenagers when they were playing. Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, I can understand that with Christopherson. He was way too old, but I actually probably consider that one of, if not maybe the greatest Western film ever made,
Yeah,
in my opinion. That's one of the absolute greatest.
yeah. No, when we did our movie, like we did a March Madness style bracket,
Uh,
John, it was me, John, Michael Anthony, Judah Sissy, Sam, and Matt. Matt's not here because he had his arm surgery, and but me and John were pushing for Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid the whole time. Out once Young Guns was out, it was like, all right, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid got our votes.
oh man, I wouldn't like to compile a list like that. I'd get uh, too tough.
It's yeah, it was easy at first because we threw in some like nonsensical Billy the Kid movies. Like there's one, it's Billy Billie, and it's a female Billy the Kid fighting vampires.
Oh, yeah, there was one Billy the Kid versus Dracula,
Yeah, that was also on there.
and you can't discount Bill and Ted.
Yeah, yeah, no, we spent far too much time on Billy the Kid versus Dracula for a movie that got kicked out first round. But the one part we enjoyed was they couldn't kill Dracula by shooting him, but when he throws the gun, it like knocks him out. It's just
Yeah,
so
sounds about right, man.
nonsensical.
Well, you gotta get a laugh from those type of movies, man.
If you
That's what they
ever want to laugh at a very, very terrible movie, there's a movie called Sharks of the Corn. And
never heard of it.
yeah, it's terrible. It just came up one day on streaming. It's about killer sharks in a cornfield. It's made with maybe $10 budget. It's terrible.
You know, the funniest, the movie that I've ever seen, the movie that made me laugh the most in my life, and this was a lot of years ago now. You're not going to believe it. It was Debbie Does Dallas.
Okay.
Seriously, man. I'm kidding, man. That ain't no porn film. That's the comedy of the century. I was holding on to my stomach watching that, man. The music, like, oh my God, it was priceless. I was just laughing. And the horrible acting, which is the same in most porn films.
Right.
Like, I was watching that. This was like 20 years ago. I'm watching that. Like, how could anyone get aroused by this? It was hilarious. It was just so dreadful. That was the funniest movie I've ever seen.
Right. Have you ever seen Blazing Saddles?
Yeah, I've got that on DVD
Yeah.
somewhere.
Do you like it?
Yeah, it's good fun. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
good laugh.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
I love
watched.
the yeah, I like the dynamic with Gene Wilder and the black sheriff and that's great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was like we referenced that one scene where he's all shaken and they're like, is that your trigger? And he's like, this is my No, that's good. So tell us a little bit more about the writing process. Like we have authors come on and there's a lot of work that goes into it. Most people just see the finished product. And that's something we can relate to when we make videos. It's a 5-10 minute video, but there's a couple weeks worth of research, a couple weeks worth of filming, a couple weeks worth of editing, and people watch
Yeah.
10 minutes. So tell us like what was the first source or where did you first start to start bringing this book together?
The first chapter I wrote was actually I'm not an A to B, A to Z writer, although I have been on this new book. I started at the start and I've been working my way to finish. First chapter I finished was chapter 24. That was the first chapter I wrote, which was his escape. And because it's a fun thing to write about. And that was the first chapter. And I just kept going from there and kind of went all over the place here and there and brought it all together. I call it jigsaw writing. You puzzle, got to put the pieces together and make it cohesive and come together. So that was it. I've never done a draft in my life of any article I've published or the book. I edit as I go. I tighten and maybe do a little bit of rewriting, add some stuff in, but I've never done drafts. It's just not something I do. The writing process beyond that, I'm not going to let you know my secrets, man. Come on, because it's so secretive. It's just, dude, it's just you just relentless work. That's really what it is. And I, I wrote that book in 18 months.
Okay.
Not recommended. Very, very little sleep, and I was like a fucking zombie at the end. I was ready to keel over, and but I got it done. I mean, I paced myself a little more with this new book, and you know, it's just a perseverance. I write by instinct. I've never attended a writing course in my life. My writing is just purely instinctive. It just comes from me. I just picked up little. I mean, I've read a lot, but so I mean, I might have absorbed kind of an approach here and there, and I've learned things over the years from other writers, little things, tidbits here and there. But I just write. I'm not. I don't have a degree in literature or anything like that. So
No, I think, like you said, the most important part about being a writer is reading. At least,
eh,
at least for me, when I do my writing, I think I've become a better writer because of reading more and more. Just because you get so many different ways of how people write, and it
yeah,
opens you up to more of a different way and an approach.
to a point, yeah, I can see that. At the same time, I think it's also something you either have or you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's not many in the Wild West field. Truth be told, there's not many good writers. There's a lot of people who can type, but there's very. I'll mention Mark Lee Gardner as one. He can write. He's a good writer.
He was hell on a high horse, right?
Yeah. He's a good writer. And there's a few others. That John Bosanek can be pretty good sometimes, and there's a lot of people who can type, but they can't really write that strongly for me. And that's I'm not. having a go at anyone else or slagging them off, but it's just the way it is. I think sometimes it's kind of, I think some writers forget that, at the end of the day, that they get so bogged down in the trying to detail the history, and I think they become frightened to just let themselves write the history,
Hmm.
and rather than just sort of regurgitating it to the reader, trying to put it in a more palatable sense.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
my profound, deep, and meaningful quote for this evening. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, so I'm not going to get much more fucking Hemingway than that. So yeah,
Right. No, at some point, someone has to
overrated.
read your book and like it, right? You can't just
Yeah,
put a textbook. I always like I've read a lot of books where it feels like reading a textbook, and those are the hardest to get through. But like
yeah.
I enjoy a good book like yours. Like I said earlier, I could get lost in, and like it's almost like a movie plays in your head when you're reading it.
Mm, that's cool, but very, very strong on the history with it though. But yeah, writing's subjective. Some people like different writers that I don't really rate highly. I mean, I prefer Sylvia Plath to Hemingway myself. I mean, I think Sylvia Plath is a far better writer than Hemingway. And I mean, Hemingway is considered the greatest American writer. I don't know about that, of his time anyway. But I think the bell jar for me, that pisses all over. The sun also, rises. It also rises. But I mean, that's me. Others might prefer the other way.
Right. No, I mean I've read some Hemingway, Old Man and the Sea, but I would pick up Great Gatsby before I picked up that.
Fitzgerald. So you're a
Hmm.
Fitzgerald man. Me, it's Hunter S. Thompson. Love Hunter S.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Thompson. But yeah, I've read The Great Gatsby. I read Catcher in the Rye, who hasn't, well, most people have. Um, but I mean, with the classics, I tend to avoid reading too much of it because I don't want to subconsciously absorb their style. I mean, I very much have my own style and my own approach, and I follow my instincts before anything else. And I don't always necessarily play within the rules. I mean, there's a lot of historians out there, they like their sentences very short, rapid fire. And to me, it kind of jams things together a little too tight. I prefer little longer sentences sometimes, not always, but then a lot of other writers in the field like. But it seems to work for me. So whatever works for me, I'm going to keep doing it.
Right. Hey, if it works, it works. It's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, if it reads well, then it reads well. Whether you know, I don't go in for Hemingway's iceberg theory though. That's just me.
No, and it must read well because we're on the same group and you get it's highly acclaimed, it seems like on that page. It's highly acclaimed on Amazon. I've enjoyed it, so it's working.
Well, I'm doing something right, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and so you've kind of talked about your next book, but do you have any plans? Because you're in Australia. Do you have any plans on any of the bush rangers out there?
No,
No.
no, 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 no. I don't. It's just not my area. It's just not something I'd pursue. I mean, I've had people say, "Oh, why don't you write a book about Ned Kelly?" It's been done. I know Billy books have been done as well, but it's just not my area.
Yeah. No, it's always interesting because like going back to John, he grew up in Roswell, so the whole Roswell stuff, he's like, all right, whatever. So it's kind of the same thing if you're around it a lot. It's not as interesting kind of deal.
He's a freak when it comes to Roswell, though, LeMay. I mean, he knows that shit
Oh yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Now
yeah, I
he
would trust him on Roswell history probably as much as anyone. But yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily that it's I'm too familiar with it. It's just I don't know. I don't know when this next book's done. I'm not sure what I'm doing. So I may write a novel. I have no idea. See when the time comes, I guess. But I have an article supposed to be running as a cover story about Django Unchained,
okay.
uh, scheduled for the upcoming November issue of True West, and that'll be out pretty soon, a month or two. or months or two, and that's going to be that article is going to rock more boats than a tsunami. It will. I'm already considered in the Old West field, as my friend Roy Young will tell you. I'm considered somewhat controversial because I can be quite outspoken, and I just call it as I see it. I don't glad hand. If a guy in the field can't write for shit, then I say so. Dave Thomas, good researcher, can't write for shit. Sorry. Bill Markley could be the nicest guy in the world. His books suck. The guy does no original research. You're not supposed to say stuff like that. You're supposed to toe the line and be, play within the bounds, but that's just not me. As far as me being controversial, I'll be controversial when this article comes out, so to speak, but you're going to have to check that out for yourself. I'm as far as I know, there's a good shot Jamie Foxx is going to be on the cover. So, and I've been pushing for that for 18 months. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely look to pick that one up. I do have quite a few of the True West. I don't always pick them up, but just because a lot of times it seems like the same cover, so I'm just like, okay. But yeah, I'll make sure to keep an eye out for that one and pick it up and read it.
Yeah, man. I got 5% battery left.
Okay. Well, let's end it
Yeah.
here because I know it's also super early in the morning tomorrow for you,
Yeah.
or today for you, yesterday
Yeah.
for
Don't
before.
start that, man. It's too confusing.
I know it's time check. I was explaining to that. I was like, how does that work? Before we end off though, why don't you let the viewers know where they can find your book if they want to find a little bit more about you, where they can do that.
All right. Well, if you want to order my book, which you should, okay, don't be a cheapskate. Order the damn thing. It's worth it. Shameless plug. A good place to get it is directly from University of North Texas Press. Go to their website online. That's a very good place to order it, a hardback copy, or you can go on Amazon if you like. Obviously, and if you're curious about the work I do, stuff I do, just type in James B. Mills on Google, and my mush will pop up. So, yeah, that's the way to go about it.
Well, James, thank you again for joining us. We definitely recommend your book as well. So, any viewer that's watching this, please go support him, pick it up, and we'll have to have you back on. Maybe we'll do an episode with you and John if we can. So that'd be fun.
That'd be awesome. I'd love to do an episode with John, man. That'd be great. Great stuff.
Yeah. Well, you take care. If you're going to bed, get some rest.
I'm gonna go get some sleep, man.
Yeah. I hear you. Yeah, I'm gonna go work. So you have a good rest of your day, and thank you again for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
No problem, man. You take care.
Once again, we want to say thank you to James for joining us on this awesome episode of Culz Interviews. It has been a while since we've talked about Billy the Kid on the channel as far as Culz Interviews goes. I know we did quite a few at the beginning, and this was quite exciting to get back into the world of Billy the Kid as far as talking to another guest, especially a historian that wrote such an awesome book like James did here with El Bandito Simpatico. Which, stay tuned, we are going to be doing a Culz book reviews on. It's a really awesome read, so we definitely recommend going into the description below, checking out those links, and buying a copy to help support James. And hopefully here soon we can do a crossover episode with James and John LeMay, which we think would be awesome. But until next time, if you want to see more Culz interviews, click that link to your left. For more about what we're doing here at Culz Paranormal, click that link to your right. For more Billy the Kid related content, click that link to your bottom right. And don't forget to hit that like and give us a subscribe. And let us know, have you read James B. Mills' Billy the Kid book? And also, what was your favorite part of this interview?